I just got accepted into one of the UK's biggest art fairs, which gives me about 6 months to create an entire collection of paintings, enough to fill this much wall space. Either this collection becomes my breakthrough moment, or I have just made the biggest mistake of my career. I knew going into this that I didn't want to bring just random pieces of art, but instead I want to create a collection. So first things first, I need a theme. And it will probably come as no surprise to hear that I went with the Royal Guard. Specifically the Household Cavalry. I mean, what better thing to paint for a London art fair than one of my favourite aspects about London? I often look to history and folklore for inspiration, but thinking about the King's Guard and the cavalry, it's like a walking piece of history. You know, they've not changed in 100 years or more, and they've been around since the 1600s. Seeing them as they are today, it's how they would have been seen generations ago, and I just think that is the coolest thing. They're basically like modern day knights, and they wear armour. Is there anything cooler, really? So now, armed with an idea that I'm well and truly inspired by, I got cracking on one of the first paintings, which is this cavalry horse. Now, this was more of a warm-up, and I still don't know if this is a painting that I am going to bring with me. I'm kind of just going to see how it fits in with the rest of the collection, but this was a really great starting point. As well as this horse, I also painted a study of one of the Royal Guards, which I actually have a demonstration of over on my Patreon. It's focused on how I painted the metal helmet and how I kept my brushwork loose. So if you are interested in painting and you'd like to see my full process, or if you'd just like to support me in this channel, then my Patreon will be down in the description. My main focus for this painting was really trying to have loose brush strokes. It's something that I'm really working on at the moment because I've gone from this really tight painting style and I'm just trying to let go a bit, because I love how these paintings look where they have these loose brush strokes and it looks so effortless, and especially now in an age where you can make anything with AI, I like the idea that a painting looks like a painting and not a photograph. It looks more real and handmade. So that's why I kind of wanted to go down this route with my paintings. For most of this, I was just using a pretty big flat brush. With this little horse study nearly done, I knew I needed to go out and find some inspiration. And I live a little while away from London, and I'm gonna wait until the weather gets a little bit nicer before I travel to see the Guard. So in the meantime, I needed to find a way to get closer to my subject. So I ended up getting to try out a bit of riding, but instead of that being in London, I was riding up in the peaks. I definitely came back to the studio with a newfound appreciation of horses and just new inspiration. Even though the whole of the cavalry pretty much ride black horses, so they all look uniform, there is one of the guards who has a white horse or a grey horse. It's the trumpeter, so it's the guy who has the trumpet with the flag with the coat of arms on it, and I just thought it would be a really great start and a standout piece because this is the only white horse that I'm going to do for this whole collection. But with my sketch done, I still didn't feel like I was ready to go straight in with the big painting. So I ended up doing a little study, a little colour study, which I usually don't do because I'm lazy. But that is so bad. I feel like I need to start taking this more seriously, and it actually really helped. I can't say enough how happy I am that I did take the extra time to do this little painting, because it meant that I went into the big painting just with a better idea of how I want it to look. Colour theory is something that I've really been trying to learn about more recently. I feel like it's something I've neglected in the past, but every colour choice I made in this piece, I really tried to make it intentional. So that orange underpainting, which ends up showing through the final piece, was intentional, and it was to make sure that the blues in the shadows would stand out, because when you have two complementary colours next to each other, it makes them even brighter. I actually got this book for Christmas off my nana, which I've been making my way through, and that has been really helpful in deciding where I want to go with colour schemes and what kind of palette I want to use. But if you're not feeling like the kind of person who learns too well from a book, then there is another option if you like to learn about colour theory, which leads me on to today's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community where you can learn basically any skill you can think of. It is a place where you can learn from the best of the best in topics such as film, illustration, painting, freelance, productivity, and so many more. So if you don't fancy spending an arm and a leg on these really expensive art books, then Skillshare is the best alternative. I found a colour theory course which covered basically everything that the book had covered. But it also included an actual painting demonstration that you're able to follow along with. But one of the best parts is the class projects. This is where you're able to submit your own work that you've done based on the videos, and you're able to get feedback as well as see other people's work. So if you're looking for an introduction to colour theory, or if you just like to try out any new hobby or creative skill, then I would highly recommend Skillshare. In fact, the first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So take this as your sign to start getting going with your creative endeavours and get started today. Ready? Look how cute. It's so small. Oh, I need to do this one on the big one. Okay, well, apart from being really cute and small, that study actually really helped me figure out what I wanted to do with this painting. The main thing that I wanted to change from the colour study to the actual painting is the values, and I wanted to make the background a little bit darker just to make the painting stand out a bit more. I know that high contrast is something that I really like. Also, don't judge me for using the smallest brush to fill this huge background. It was the only one I had on hand and I really couldn't be bothered washing any of my others. So it took a bit longer than it should have. Oh well. I ended up just using some burnt umber to sketch in my shapes and just to block in where the shadows are going to be, before then going in and blocking in the lighter areas. Which is strange, I usually block in the darker areas, but I just felt like I had to do the light ones first. I don't know. Is there a method to the madness? No. As I was making this painting, it had me questioning though, why a white horse? Why does a trumpeter ride the white horse when every single other guard rides a black horse? Well, there seems to be an actual reason for this rooted in military history. Cavalry trumpeters needed to be easily identifiable on the battlefield because they are the signallers. They would signal to all the other guards, so they needed to be seen easily. Obviously this isn't as important now because we're not on a battlefield, but today the white horses of the trumpeters are maintained as part of just ceremonial tradition. Oh, also, I've actually changed the way I'm maintaining my paintbrushes. So I heard from an artist, I'll tag him here, that it's so much easier if you just put your paintbrushes in oil and just leave them in oil so they never dry out. They just stay wet, and it means that they're going to last a lot longer and it's a lot easier to maintain. So I'll do a full video on my Patreon about how I care for all my supplies and my setup and everything, where I'll show how I do that. But yeah, I just got some cheap oil and now I don't really have to clean my paintbrushes as often. The ceremonial banner attached to the trumpet was so much fun to paint. Like, if you look at them closely, they are so detailed and it was so difficult not to grab the smallest brush I could find and just go to town detailing it. But because I'm doing a full body portrait, it wouldn't make sense for this to be super detailed. So I had to just rein it in a bit and just create the indication of the shapes and colours on it instead of really detailing everything. Looking at these old photographs and paintings, much of what they wear and what the horse is dressed in is very similar. You can see based on the old artwork how little the tradition has changed, which I think is really cool, especially with so many things changing. If you're wondering about the coat of arms, the lion on the left represents England and the unicorn on the right represents Scotland. But anyway, if you are interested in purchasing this painting or any of the other paintings in the collection, or even just coming down and seeing me, I will be at the Untitled Artist Fair in September of this year in London. I believe it's from the 7th to the 9th of September. So if you would like to come down and buy some artwork, see some cool artists, then the tickets are free and I will put them down in the description. This week, as well as painting, I've had to cover a lot of shifts at my other job because it's my boyfriend's family's restaurant and they needed some extra help this week. So instead of doing what I usually do, where I try and finish a painting in like 1 or 2 sittings while it's still wet, I had to really split it up because I was working every day. So now I have this kind of like half finished base layer, and what I'm going to try and do is oil out the surface with a mixture of linseed oil and Gamsol to basically almost like reactivate the surface, and then paint over the whole thing again in like the top layer. And I'm hoping it will still give this kind of alla prima look, even though that's not really how I did it. Okay, I feel like I explained that really poorly. Oiling out doesn't reactivate the paint or anything, unfortunately oils can't do that, but it did give me a wet surface to work on in hopes that that would help the new layer look more cohesive with the previous layers, if that makes sense. Moving on to the god's face, it's such an important part of the painting, it's one of the main subjects of this piece, but his face is tiny, it's about as big as my thumbnail, so I had to be really careful about the level of detail that I needed here. So what I did was I basically painted the face colour of the face, and then I added a shadow for the eye socket and a shadow for beneath the nose. Basically just 3 brush strokes that I did this in, and the effect that it ended up leaving was absolutely perfect. You could see the indication of a face, but it also wasn't overly detailed. So after a few finishing touches on the reins, that is this painting pretty much finished. I'm really happy with how it turned out, and I am so excited to just make this collection. I just have a feeling that each painting is going to get better and better. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed it, and I will see you on the next one.